Hello, tonight we're going to be talking about the new tactics decks. Corvus Belli will be releasing 2 new advanced tactics decks to go along with Aristeia. Now you can use these instead of the standard tactics deck that come with the game, or you can just keep on using the standard. So we've had a chance to look them over. So thank you very much, Corvus Belli. And right now, I'll have some thoughts about it afterwards, but we're going to just go ahead and start looking at them. There are 2 decks that will be coming together in, it'll be a blister pack, I think. There's going to be the TCOM deck, and there's also the Sterling deck. So what we want to look at here first is going to be the TCOM deck. So the first thing I want to explain about TCOM, and really even with Sterling, is they both have conditions on some of their cards that you may not necessarily be used to. If you look at the typical standard cards, when you're looking at the buffs that add a yellow die, a blue die, or an orange die to your deck, those can be used with pretty much any time with any roll. This is not the case with TCOM or Sterling. Those cards, you'll still get a pair of additional yellows, additional oranges, additional blues. The trick that's going to come up is one of them will say before making a roll, the other will have a little bit more of a condition on it. So for instance, we're going to look at 2 cards right here, Catharsis and Anticipation. Catharsis and Anticipation both bring a yellow die to your roll. This is fantastic. On top of that, and this is the powerful part, and I think what they're trying to balance out, is for pretty much all the buff cards here, you may draw 2 tactics. If you do, choose 2 tactics from your hand and return them individually to the top or bottom of your deck. So those of you who are used to playing Magic the Gathering or Ascension or really any sort of card-based game, whether it's a collectible card game or a deck building game, you know that drawing cards, choosing what to keep and putting the rest back kind of where you want them, is a huge thing. That's a great way to manipulate your deck and basically try and make sure you get what you want. So you're going to draw 2 cards. You're going to look at 2 cards that you have right now that maybe aren't the greatest. So you can put them at the top of your deck or the bottom of your deck. So if it's a longer term thing like, oh, I'm not ready for that, you stick it in the bottom. It's like, oh, here's a nice combo I could do, or I want to have that come up next, you put it at the top. Very powerful ability. So if you look at Catharsis, it says the timing is before making a roll. You can use this at any time you have Catharsis in your hand. But if you look at Anticipation, it says very specifically, before making a roll that is not an attack roll. This is important. So for instance, with, say, Musashi, his switch on his primary attack, Ken no Sen, likes to have yellows. It likes the exclamation points. This cannot be used with an attack roll. Now, if you are doing a defensive roll, if you are doing a disengage roll, if you are doing perhaps an ability roll, then you could use Anticipation. But if it's an attack roll, immediately, nope, sorry, you can't use it here. And this is probably the only complaint I've seen I have so far right now with it, is that the cards in their art are not quite different enough for my liking. I would prefer something to have been, really obvious that, hey, in this situation, but not that situation. But as long as you're reading the cards and your opponent reads the cards, you should be in good shape. So, and again, but you still do get the yellow die, just not as often for attack rolls. Next up will be triangulation and counterattack. These are both orange dice. And again, you draw 2 tactics, and then you return 2 tactics to your deck, top or bottom, individually. Counterattack is before making a roll. This is your all-purpose orange. Triangulation is before making a roll that is not an attack roll. Kind of seeing the picture here. And that's actually a very interesting one, because with triangulation, and since you can't use it with an attack roll in an orange, so this kind of automatically, ironically, I think they should have switched the names. So if you're making a defensive roll, you know, you'd be able to use triangulation for that, which is why I think they should have named that one counterattack. Likewise, if you are attempting to disengage, if you're trying to trigger an ability, things like that, triangulation will work, but again, not with an attack roll. And this is sort of the double-edged aspect of TCOM, is that half of your buff cards really do not work on attacks. So next up, take cover and cover 3. Take cover, again, before making roll, add a blue die, draw 2 tactics. If you do, choose 2 tactics from your hand, return them individually to the top or bottom of your deck, just like the others. Cover 3, before making a roll that is not an attack roll. So again, the limited aspect of that, here it's not quite so bad. Primarily when you're using a blue die, it is with a defensive action. There are exceptions to this, of course. Musashi and Valkyrie would be great examples of characters that can use blue dice offensively. Part of the reason you cycle through your cards in this fashion, though, is so you do get the version of the card that you want. Next up is going to be Mental Bug. During the action steps of one of your character's activations, choose a player. The chosen player must discard 2 tactics chosen randomly. If they only have 1 tactic left, they must discard it. This is not quite a no. So you don't really get to choose what it is. You just kind of hope that you get lucky. So, and that is another aspect of both of these new decks, is they don't have no's, they have almost no's. So they got Tao Wu there as part of the art. Very fitting for this. So that one, obviously, if someone's low on tactics, go ahead and use it. If you've been watching their cards and you think they've been fishing for something, you know, you could get lucky here. It is a good way to step them back in terms of the actions they can take during their turn, or even during your turn, depending what what it is. But it's also an interesting card if you're doing TCOM versus TCOM, in that this could potentially really set someone back. Because instead, it's not going back to their deck, it's going to the discard pile. So, very much worth looking at. This would be something you would regularly... It's something you should use pretty quickly, especially if they draw something and they get a little look on their face like they're happy. Next up is Primetime. At the beginning of the switches step of an action's roll. So activate a general switch or a switch for the current action once without spending any symbols. Now that is huge, but it's also dependent on the character. Some characters have better switches than others when you really think about it. And when I say better, I should also throw in, harder to trigger. So for instance, Musashi if he is going to do his second attack, Wild Bill doing a second twin pistols, things like that. Things that they come up, but it's not as likely. Additionally, if you need a kind of a clutch, I need my switch, here's my switch. That's basically what Primetime does. So that's a great card. Followed by Broken Firewall. During the action steps of one of your character's activations, look at your opponent's hand, choose one tactic. So I'm going to be completely honest. The fact that you are looking at your opponent's hand is huge. And really a simple combination there would be do Broken Firewall, then right after that do Mental Bug. If you see enough in there that's worthwhile. You're not guaranteed to get everything you see, but if you see a lot of specific cards that maybe don't combo well, fantastic. Look at your opponent's hands, choose one tactic, return that tactic to the top or bottom of their deck. Now, why you would want to put something at the top of their deck versus their bottom, I think it's going to be very situation specific. It's going to depend on who they've got, who you've got. So it's a good way to annoy them, and bottom line is it's out of their hand. If you're not close to the end of the round, and if you're not really in danger of them fragging or scoring, this could be good. And frankly, you could take something that's just completely inappropriate for the time, put it right on top, and you can smirk. So finally is probably the most interesting card of the T-Con deck. It's called What If. It's got a great picture of Oberon on it. And during the action steps of one of your character's activations, this is the part that's going to be interesting. Choose one of your character's tactics that is not part of your tactics decks and put it in your hand. Remove What If from the game. This card is the one that Broken Firewall should be sending to the bottom. This is not a card you don't want your opponent to play. If you're playing against someone who's using a standard deck, this should get almost an instant no. So normally you have a 4-character team, and each team member brings 2 cards with them. And it's easy to... You can't plan for every situation, and there's always going to be a situation where you're going to want... It's like, oh gosh, I wish I had this other card for Oberon, or I wish I had this other card for Gata, or Pavardi, or Hexer, or whoever. This would let you get that card. That is amazing. Now, it kind of evens things out by it's removed from the game after use, but that in and of itself is still an amazing ability. It's tremendous, and it'll give you a type of flexibility that isn't really inherent to any of the other decks. Just being able to do that, and you've got basically 8 cards you can choose from. So that's really good. That is amazing, and again, that should almost certainly be no bait from the get-go. Which, of course, actually might be what you just want to do. You might actually be perfectly happy, but you want to get that no out of the way. So if someone's using a standard deck, you play What If they've got their no, and this is the risk. If they've got their no available, they should almost certainly use it. There's a certain psychology you can do with cards, and the threat of a card sometimes is enough to simply get someone to do something you don't want them to do. For instance, one character I like is Shona. She has a card in there called Amputate. It's an attack, and if she hits with Amputates, well, the character she hits basically sent straight to the infirmary. No questions asked. The threat of a card like that will often cause someone to hold on to their no. What If is one of those cards. The mere threat of it, doesn't matter if you actually plan on using it, should be enough to get someone to bring out no, and hopefully leave an opening for other cards you want to play. Unless they have a way to get that no back, or if they say have Tao Wu and they have 2 no's already, again using a standard deck, it's no bait. So if you're going to play it, you should play with a very good expectation, very high expectation that they're going to say no. You know, that's okay. Next up, we're going to be talking about Sterling. Sterling is the second of the 2 advanced tactics decks. And this one's actually a lot of fun as well, but it's a little different kind of fun. So first off, it's going to have a similar setup in that it's going to have 1 unconditional before making a roll buff for each of the dice, but then it's also going to have a conditional one, and the condition here is before making a combat roll. So we're going to look at it. The first set here we're going to look at is Insights and Adrenaline. Insights, before making a roll, add a yellow die. You may re-roll 1 die before the critical block and switches step of this roll. No die in this roll can be re-rolled more than once. So with Insights, fantastic. This is amazing. This helps bring up the reliability of your rolls as a whole. Here comes the downside. Adrenaline, its counterpart, before making a combat roll. So this is literally no good for your defensive rolls, for your disengage rolls, for your brawl rolls. If you're making an ability check, say healing with Pavarti, it's not a combat roll. Now I could be wrong, but that is currently my understanding, that this needs to be in a combat roll. So, but that would be Adrenaline. Hold On and Defensive Stance. So Hold On, both of them at a blue. They got a great picture of Musashi and Valkyrie. And again, it's, you add the blue, you get to re-roll 1 die. You may, and that's an important note. You don't. It's not you must. It's you may. You could be perfectly happy and like, nope, I'm good. And no die can be re-rolled more than once. Defensive Stance, again, before making a combat roll. Then we go on to Effectiveness versus Precision. Effectiveness adds an orange. Precision, orange before making a combat roll. So again, you have this duality of the buff dice are very powerful with their secondary effect, but they're limited. There's a kind of a break on it to keep them from being too crazy. So you can use them to great effect, but you can't always use them. So next up will be I Own My Luck. I got a great picture of Hannibal, my gosh. Before the beginning of the switches step of an attack's roll, choose the results of up to 2 orange, blue, or yellow dice of your roll in any combination. Okay, that is not quite a free switch. That is darn close. So now it is worth noting, however, that the green, red, and black dice are not included here. Now, normally the black die, it's a shield, not a big deal, but it's worth noting, and I'm glad they don't include the red or the green, because you can't decide, hey, I'm going to go ahead and use the criticals. So the normal buff dice, you can max it out or go for the specific combination you want or need at any given time. That's pretty amazing. So next up is going to be Dirty Trick. We've got a very scary picture of Senior Massacre. Giving love to Maximus. Terrible. At the beginnings of the switches step of an activation's roll, Activate a general switch or a switch for the current action once without spending any symbols. Again, TCOM had this. That's totally fine. By inches is the next card. This one is the one I actually find the most interesting, and I think is probably going to be situationally one of the most valuable. Before performing an action, this action has its minimum range increased by 1, or has its its maximum range increased by 1, or has its minimum range decreased by 1. So what does that mean? When you're looking at a character, many of the range characters have minimum ranges. So if you are adjacent to them, they can't actually use their preferred attack on you. So if you're going to go ahead and do, say, twin pistols, well, that's 2 to 6, I believe it is. Wild Bill cannot handle someone being directly next to him. If you use by inches, he is now able to use twin pistols on someone adjacent to him. This is a beautiful card. But then you also have the horrifying idea that, you know, it says this action. So Musashi can all of a sudden have a range 2 sword slash. That's pretty nice. I believe this would also combine with a card that Major Luna has, Hollow Sights, where she increases the range of an attack by 2. So you can have an amazing sniper, you can have just this ridiculously large melee attack that goes 1, possibly 3. I'll need to check that later on. But it gives you a little more breathing room. Someone using, say, Hammerhead or Shona, the two of them having minimum ranges on melee attacks, would find tremendous utility in this as well. So when you take it, look over your teams and think of, you know, if I could adjust the range by 1, what would that do for me? Or what can that do to someone else? You'll start seeing a lot of fun possibilities. And finally, for Sterling, we've got Reload. During the action step of one of your character's activations, take all standard tactics from your discard pile whose timing text contains before making a roll or before making a combat roll and shuffle them into your deck. Draw 1 tactic. So what you have here is just what it says. It's a reload. I would see this as more of a mid to late game type thing, especially if you're playing Blitz or something where you're just going through cards and cards and cards. But this is fantastic. This is kind of close to one of the abilities that Hannibal has in his tactics, where he can basically just reincorporate his discard pile. So you're listening to all these things, and this is kind of where we're getting to my thoughts. You have these amazingly powerful cards that add yellows, they add blues, they add oranges to your dice pool. And yes, some of them are conditional, but oh my gosh, doesn't this utterly render standard complete obsolete? And at this point, I'm going to say, well, 1, obviously is too soon to tell, but also I would say not yet. We'll see in a year's time what everyone thinks, but just from initial bluff, my first reaction, I'm going to say that standard is still not only valid, but viable and desirable, because its main thing is it doesn't have that many strings attached. When you look at the 6 buff cards, you can, if you wanted to use them all in a go ahead. You can. If you need it at any given time, you can use them. Likewise, Fortune Favors the Badass lets you reroll 1 of your dice, and it lets you reroll any of your dice, which is better than Sterling will allow. And so that's good. And it's not so mind-blowing that, you know, it's going to cause problems per se. It's not no bait. Stick to the plan is probably the only one that has a string attached, because yes, you search for one tactics card, you shuffle your deck, and each player draws one tactic. Honestly, I have yet to see that get hit with a no, because both players benefits. You benefit more than your opponents, but still. So that one's almost, it's not, it would have to be a really weird situation where someone's going to know that. So you're almost getting it for free. No is the quintessential counter. And if you want to mess up someone's day, you got no. Sterling and TCOM do not have no. There's the almost no, but almost no is still not no. So if you pick Tao Wu, then quite frankly, you have the possibility of having two no's, and there's no real response from those two decks, I feel. And of course, Catch Your Breath. One of my favorite cards. Everyone likes it. Can that get a no? Yes, it can get a no. TCOM Sterling do not have no's. And of course, the easiest combination that I think any Aristeia player playing more than 3 games will have figured out: stick to the plan, catch your breath. You get 3 cards right there. So it's a very simple built-in combo that's just beautiful. So what I'm looking at right here, Primus is really pointed this out as well, is TCOM gives you deck manipulation. So that helps you get what you want more reliably. Sterling gives you dice manipulation and helps give you more consistent results. Both of them are conditional in that, so you can't do it all the time, and you can't enjoy the benefits of all the 6 main buff cards all the time. But when you get to use them, they are quite nice. Standard deck doesn't have any of those real tricks aside from stick to the plan, catch your breath, and no. And that's 3 really good cards. And again, it's just their buff cards are usable in any situation. And that in and of itself makes Standard very much worth using. I think really what you want to look at here is what the scenario is going to be, what your team's going to look like, and what you're going for. So you could really specialize. So if you're going to be using TCOM, for instance, having characters that draw cards on a regular basis, or at least have the chance to, such as, say, Oberon or Wild Bill, and that's going to be fantastic. There'll be good additions to that. When it comes to the dice manipulation, having characters that provide buffs on top of that is going to be really good, because you can really kind of maximize everything. So having Hannibal or Lakshmi along with that is going to be wonderful. In addition to that, it's sort of a way to respond to characters that offer stun conditions. So again, you're looking at, say, Lakshmi, you are looking at, oh gosh, who else does stun? Final Boss, people like them. Stun can be very detrimental, so having that doesn't relieve you of the state, but it helps compensate for it. So I'm excited. We've talked to the guys, and we're really excited about this. I know we've got Reckless Hearts coming in hopefully tomorrow. And this should really help shake up the game, and it gives you another way to help define the style that you want to play. I would actually, spend some time to think about all 3 of them and how that can affect the way you play and the way you want to play. And that'll give you a lot more versatility. We'll actually when it comes out. We'll put a link in the description. But it's going to be a nice shakeup for the game without, I think, being too disruptive, which is wonderful. It'll give you a lot more variety. And each pack, it's going to be TCOM and Sterling in a pack is about, I think it's supposed to be around $12 US, €11.99 euro. So it's going to be a very affordable way to do it. The pack will be basically for one player. So we're ordering 4 because we've got 2 sets of Aristeia, 2 players per set. So I don't know about you, but we're excited. So thank you very much for joining us. Like, comment, subscribe. By the way, we do have games on Twitch. So if you want to check us out on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/shamelessmayhem. Check us out over there. We'll play our newest games there, as well as Tilt Brush, which is the VR art by Bonsai Zap. You'll get notified when that happens. And our longtime archives are here on YouTube, so if you subscribe there, well, you'll get notifications here too. Thank you much. Have a great night from Maui, and see you next time.